Then a couple of other things. In 2011, we developed something which was called supply chain responsibility or value chain responsibility. And that means, for example, that a producer of a TV is also responsible for what's going on in the supply chain, for example, of the minerals that are in the television or in your mobile phone. And we have developed with business and with a huge multi-stakeholder process guidance for specific sectors. For the mineral sector, so the famous conflict minerals work, that's all based on the OECD minerals guidance. But we've also developed guidance for the agricultural sector, for the institutional investor sector, for mining, and now we're also working on guidance for banks. But of course, the OECD cannot make guidance for hundreds of sectors out there. So that's why we were asked to develop guidance for all sectors. So that's what we will launch next week, 31 May. And that's a guidance for business, for all supply chains, all value chains. So that's a very important document, because also there's another trend, which is that governments more and more take the soft law of the OECD and make it into hard law. The most famous example is the French due diligence law, the devoir de vigilance law, basically based on the OECD guidelines due diligence concept. And that's an important point, because businesses, they don't like 180 different due diligence laws. They want a law, and they want laws that are consistent all over the world. So that's why it's so good that many of these international developments are at least anchored in international instruments that guarantee a level playing field. In Germany, I think a very important development is going on. If by 2020, less than 50% of the companies that are bigger than 500 employees have no robust due diligence system in place, then the government will examine legal options as well, like in France. But there's also quite a number of countries that are moving towards legislating due diligence. You have, for example, in California, there's a law for this. The UK Modern Slavery Act makes it mandatory to report on your efforts in your supply chain when it comes to modern slavery, child labor, etc. Australia is working on an anti-modern slavery act. In Switzerland, there will be a referendum on a due diligence law. In the Netherlands, there are due diligence sectoral agreements. And of course, there's a lot of work going on disclosure. So you have the famous EU, European Union, Non-Financial Disclosure Directive, basically making transparency and reporting on responsible business mandatory, and specifically on due diligence and supply chains. And of course, there's also a law in the EU that is making the due diligence on minerals mandatory, the EU minerals regulation, and that's also building on the OECD work.